The battle for Mosul has always been more difficult from one day to the next. The Kurdish Peshmerga fought their way towards Mosul, one village at a time. 1,600 of them lost their lives fighting this extremist group. For Iraqi troops, it was a house-to-house battle. It was a vicious, bloody, and destructive war. Thousands of troops and civilians have died. Many homes, churches, mosques, and markets have been destroyed. For me, it wasn't the first time to see a war in Mosul. I've been covering and visiting this city on and off for almost 15 years. And each time I have found it more dangerous and scarier than the last. I first went to Mosul in April of 2003. Saddam Hussein's regime had just been toppled by the Americans. There was an eerie silence everywhere. The streets were deserted. Many stayed indoors. Others had fled for safety. One place that was crowded was Saddam Hussein's palace. People had come to see its gardens and swimming pools. They were curious to see the palace of the man who had ruled them with an iron fist. The second time I went back to Mosul was 3 months later, in July of 2003, shortly after Saddam Hussein's 2 sons, Uday and Qusay, were found and killed by American forces. Across from the destroyed house, where the dictator's 2 sons had been hiding, there was an angry crowd, chanting slogans in praise of Saddam Hussein and pledging revenge. Less than a year after the US invasion, Mosul became a hotbed for former Ba'athists and Islamist insurgents. American soldiers were under constant attack. Government employees, police officers, and army recruits were assassinated. Mosul became one of the most dangerous cities. The Iraqi army did not have any control, the police were powerless, and the government was symbolic. Even years before the arrival of ISIS, soldiers patrolled the city as if it were a battlefield. They went from one part of town to another in full gear, body armor, and very nervous. In control were Ansar al-Sunnah and other insurgent groups. They strengthened their foothold in the city and purged anyone that stood in their way. Some of these soldiers told me they were stationed in Mosul during those years. They were the target of car bombs and hit-and-run attacks day and night. Islamist groups became so strong that they eventually swept away the army and police and took over Mosul in the summer of 2014. Then they declared an Islamic Caliphate. Radical groups were always in control of Mosul, but it was after the ISIS occupation that the world came to realize the threat that Mosul posed to Iraq, the region, and the whole world as a base for terrorists. A global coalition soon attacked ISIS on the ground and from the air. When I joined them as a reporter to cover their operations, I realized I had been standing exactly at some of these spots years earlier, writing about a different offensive against Mosul. This time, the situation was very different. ISIS was more powerful than any other group that had previously taken Mosul, including even the Al-Qaeda. It seized advanced American weapons from the Iraqi army. Foreign fighters joined the group from around the world. Many of them were bomb experts. They dug tunnels, they built car bombs and mortar shells.
Now I'm here to show you an ISIS bomb-making factory.
Their snipers took the lives of civilians and soldiers alike. The advance of Iraqi and Kurdish forces towards Mosul was always slow and painful. As the war came to the city, once again I found myself in Mosul, in the company of the elite Golden Division as they fought their way through the heavily populated areas.
We are here in Zuhur neighborhood of Mosul. Iraqi army and ISIS militants in the city of Mosul. We are probably only meters away from ISIS militants because I can hear the sound of their bullets whizzing overhead.
The militants had used the time to dig in deep and refused to give up without a fight. As a result, homes were destroyed, hospitals, schools, and public buildings were demolished. The city is now scarred beyond recognition. The ancient capital of Nineveh is damaged for good. Tens of thousands of people were forced to flee. militants still manage to attack liberated areas every now and then. Fear and uncertainty still remains. Yet despite all the blood, tragedy and heartbreak, some still remain optimistic. They hope they can start over again. And they know that rebuilding trust between people and the government is the first step.